The bloodstains on her dress had dried to a rust-brown color by the time Rebecca Bailey stumbled into the chicken coop behind the small ranch house, collapsing among the straw and startled hens that scattered with indignant squawks before settling back around her trembling form. She had been running for 3 days through the Arizona desert, following whatever shade she could find during the scorching daylight hours and moving by moonlight when the temperature dropped enough to allow travel. The dress that had once been a pale blue calico now hung in tatters, torn by mesquite bushes and caked with dust that turned to mud where her sweat soaked through. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins somewhere during the first day, and now fell in matted tangles around her face. At 22 years old, Rebecca had never imagined her life would lead to hiding among chickens in a stranger's coop, but the alternative was far worse. The stagecoach attack replayed in her mind every time she closed her eyes. She had been traveling from Tucson to meet her intended husband in Gila Bend, a man she had never met, but who had paid her passage from Philadelphia after corresponding with her for 6 months through carefully written letters. The arrangement had seemed like providence after her father's death left her alone and penniless, working in a textile factory for wages that barely kept her fed. A new life in Arizona territory, marriage to a prosperous merchant, a home of her own, these dreams had sustained her through the long journey west. Then the gunshots had shattered the afternoon quiet. The driver had fallen first, tumbling from his seat to land in a twisted heap on the hard, packed road. The guard had managed to fire twice before a bullet caught him in the chest. Rebecca had watched in horror as the outlaws surrounded the coach, their faces covered with bandanas, their intentions clear in their cold eyes. She had jumped from the moving coach as it slowed, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Somehow she had rolled into a dry wash, scrambling on hands and knees through the brush while gunfire echoed behind her. She heard the other passengers screaming, heard the rough laughter of the outlaws as they ransacked the luggage. She kept moving, driven by pure survival instinct, not daring to look back. Now, 3 days later, she had found this place. The ranch house sat in a small valley with a creek running through it, cottonwood trees providing blessed shade. The chicken coop had seemed like sanctuary when she spotted it in the pre-dawn darkness. She had crawled inside, burrowed into the straw, and let exhaustion claim her. The chickens pecked at the ground around her, apparently accustomed to strange occurrences in their domain. A large rooster strutted past, eyeing her with one golden eye before deciding she posed no threat to his hens. Rebecca's last conscious thought was that at least the chickens were warm, and she was so very cold despite the Arizona heat. The sun had climbed high when footsteps crunched on the dirt outside the coop. Rebecca jerked awake, her heart hammering, but her body refused to move. Every muscle felt like it had been beaten with a stick. She heard the door creak open, saw boots step into her line of vision. Good boots, well worn but carefully maintained. Above them, denim trousers dusty from work. A man's voice spoke, deep and measured. "Well now, I came looking for eggs and found something entirely different." Rebecca tried to push herself up but only managed to raise her head a few inches. The man crouched down, bringing his face into view. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed a trim. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they studied her with concern rather than threat. He wore a simple work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms tanned dark and corded with muscle. "Please," Rebecca managed to whisper, her voice cracking with thirst. "Do not send me back to the road. They might still be looking." Something shifted in the man's expression. He pulled off his hat, revealing more of his face. There was strength in his features, but also kindness in the lines around his eyes. "Nobody is going to hurt you here, miss. That is a promise. Can you stand?" "I do not think so," he nodded once decisively. "Then I will carry you." "Put your arms around my neck." Rebecca barely had the strength to comply, but she managed to lift her arms as he slid one arm under her knees and another behind her back. He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, and she found herself pressed against his chest as he carried her out of the chicken coop into the bright morning. She squinted against the sunlight, turning her face against his shoulder. "I am Franklin Dalton," he said as he walked. "This is my ranch. You are safe here." "Rebecca Bailey," she whispered. "I was on the stagecoach, the one that was attacked." His stride faltered for just a moment. "That was 3 days ago. The sheriff in Gila Bend sent word. They found the coach and the driver and guard, but the passengers were gone. They figured the outlaws took them or worse. I jumped. I ran. I have been walking ever since." Franklin carried her up the steps of his ranch house and pushed through the door with his shoulder. The interior was dim and cool, a blessed relief from the heat. He set her down carefully on a settee upholstered in worn leather. "Stay put. I will get water and food." Rebecca closed her eyes, hardly believing she had found shelter. The house smelled of wood smoke and coffee, masculine scents but not unpleasant. She heard Franklin moving in what must be the kitchen, heard the pump working and water splashing into a basin. When he returned, he carried a cup of water and a damp cloth. "Drink slowly," he instructed, holding the cup to her lips. "Not too much at first or you will just bring it back up." The water was the most delicious thing Rebecca had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but Franklin controlled the flow, making her take small sips. Between drinks, he used the damp cloth to wipe the dirt from her face with surprising gentleness. His hands were rough with calluses but moved with careful precision. "That dress is ruined," he observed, "and you have got cuts and scrapes all over. When did you last eat?" "The morning of the attack. We stopped at a way station." Franklin's jaw tightened. 3 days. Lord above, woman, it is a miracle you made it this far. He stood. "I am going to make you some broth. Nothing heavy yet. Then we need to tend those wounds and get you into clean clothes." "I do not have any other clothes," Rebecca said quietly. "Everything I owned was in my trunk on that coach. I will figure something out. Just rest now." As Franklin returned to the kitchen, Rebecca let herself look around the room properly. The house was small but well built, with solid furniture that looked handmade. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and above the mantel hung a rifle and a faded photograph of a stern-looking couple. Books lined a small shelf near the window. Everything was neat and orderly, the home of a man who took care of his possessions. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Franklin was touching her shoulder gently. "Rebecca, I have got some broth here. Think you can sit up a bit?" He helped her into a more upright position, propping pillows behind her back. The broth was simple, just chicken and vegetables, but it tasted like heaven. Franklin fed her slowly, spooning the liquid carefully so she would not spill it on herself. There was something deeply intimate about the act, this stranger caring for her with such patient attention. "Why are you doing this?" she asked between spoonfuls. "You do not know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Franklin said simply. "And because no woman should have to go through what you have been through. When you are stronger, you can tell me the whole story. For now, just focus on getting your strength back." After she had eaten about half the broth, Franklin insisted she stop. "Too much too fast will make you sick. Let that settle, then you can have more in a few hours." He set the bowl aside. "Now about those cuts. I am going to need to clean them, and some of them look like they might need stitching." Rebecca looked down at her arms, seeing for the first time the extent of the damage. Deep scratches crisscrossed her skin, some still oozing. Her hands were blistered and torn. I did not even feel most of these. You were running on fear and determination. Now that you have stopped, you will start feeling everything. Franklin retrieved a wooden box from a shelf. I have done plenty of doctoring on horses and cattle, and some on people too. There is no real doctor closer than Gila Bend, and that is a 2-hour ride. I trust you, Rebecca said, surprising herself with the truth of it. There was something solid and dependable about Franklin Dalton, something that made her feel safe for the first time since the attack. He worked carefully, cleaning each wound with water boiled and cooled, then applying a salve that stung but smelled of herbs. 2 of the cuts on her arm did need stitching, and Rebecca bit down on a leather strap Franklin provided while he worked with steady hands. She had expected it to hurt terribly, but his touch was so precise that the pain was bearable. "You are very good at this," she said when he tied off the last stitch. "Learned from my mother. She was the closest thing to a healer in these parts before she passed. People would come from miles around when they were hurt or sick." He wrapped a clean bandage around her arm. "She always said that a gentle hand heals faster than a rough one." "When did she die?" "5 years ago. My father went 2 years before that. Since then, it has just been me and the animals." Franklin's expression grew distant. "Gets lonely sometimes, but it is a good life. Honest work, clean air, nobody telling you what to do." Rebecca studied his face, seeing the solitude etched there beneath the weathering and strength. "No wife." "Almost. Her name was Sarah. We were supposed to get married, but she decided she wanted more than a small ranch could offer. Went back east with a mining engineer who struck silver up near Prescott." Franklin shrugged, but Rebecca saw the old pain flicker in his eyes. "That was 3 years ago. Have not really looked since." "I am sorry. Do not be. If she could not love this life, she could not love me. Better to know before the vows are said." He finished wrapping her other arm. "Now, about clothes. I have got some of my mother's old things packed away. We were about the same height, you and her. Might be something that will fit you until we can get you something better." The thought of wearing a dead woman's clothes should have bothered Rebecca, but she was too grateful for the offer to care. "That would be wonderful. Thank you." Franklin left and returned a few minutes later with a simple cotton dress in a faded floral pattern and some undergarments that had been carefully preserved in paper. "The washroom is through that door. Think you can manage on your own, or do you need help?" Rebecca's cheeks flushed. "I can manage." It took her longer than it should have. Her legs shook when she stood, and she had to hold onto the wall to keep from falling. The washroom was small but clean, with a basin and pitcher of water, a mirror spotted with age, and hooks for clothes. Rebecca struggled out of her ruined dress, seeing her body properly for the first time in days. Bruises covered her ribs and legs in purple and yellow patches. Her feet were blistered and bloody. She looked like she had been through a war. Using the water and a cloth Franklin had left, she washed as best she could, hissing at the sting when soap found cuts she had not known existed. When she finally pulled on the clean dress, she felt almost human again. The dress fit reasonably well, perhaps a bit loose in the waist but close enough. She ran wet fingers through her hair, trying to work out the worst of the tangles, but gave up when her arms got too tired. When she emerged, Franklin had set out a hairbrush on the table. "Thought you might need this." "I cannot lift my arms that high right now," Rebecca admitted. "Sit down." "I will do it." "You do not have to, Rebecca." His voice was firm but kind. "You are hurt and exhausted. Let somebody help you." She sat. Franklin stood behind her and began working the brush through her hair with careful strokes, starting at the ends and working up to avoid pulling. His touch was gentle, patient, taking time to work through each tangle. No man had ever done something so intimate for Rebecca before, and she found herself relaxing under his ministrations. "You have beautiful hair," Franklin said quietly, "like autumn leaves." "My mother always said it was my best feature." The memory brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. "She died when I was 16. Then it was just father and me until he died 6 months ago." "What were you doing on that stagecoach?" Rebecca told him the whole story as he brushed her hair. About her father's death, the factory work, the advertisement she had answered from a merchant in Gila Bend named Howard Fitzgerald who wanted a mail-order bride, the careful letters they had exchanged, the money he sent for her passage, the hope she had carried all the way from Philadelphia that she might finally have a home and family again. "You love this man?" Franklin asked, his hands pausing in her hair. "I do not even know him, but he seemed kind in his letters. And he was offering me something better than 12-hour days in a factory." Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. "I suppose he thinks I am dead now." Franklin resumed brushing, his strokes long and soothing. "What do you want to do?" "I do not know. I have no money, no possessions." Everything was in that trunk. She felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "I should go to Gila Bend, find Mr. Fitzgerald, explain what happened. He paid for my passage. I owe him that much." "You do not owe anybody anything, Rebecca. You survived an outlaw attack and 3 days in the desert. That takes strength and courage." Franklin's voice was closer now, as if he had leaned down. "You have got options. You can go to Gila Bend if that is what you want, or you can stay here at least until you are fully healed. Then decide. I cannot impose on you like that." "It is not an imposition if I am offering." Franklin came around to face her, crouching down so they were eye level. "This house has been too empty for too long. Having someone to cook for, talk to, that sounds pretty good to me right about now. You can help around the place if you want to feel useful, but mostly just get better, get strong again." Rebecca searched his face, looking for ulterior motives but finding only honest concern. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Franklin was quiet for a long moment. "Because when I found you in that chicken coop, you looked about as lost and alone as I have felt these past few years. And because it seems to me that maybe we both could use some company. But if you want to go, I will take you to Gila Bend tomorrow. Your choice." The thought of leaving this safe place, of facing the uncertain future in town, filled Rebecca with dread. But more than that, she realized she did not want to leave Franklin Dalton. In just a few hours, he had shown her more genuine kindness than she had experienced in years. "I would like to stay," she said softly. "At least for a little while, if you are sure." Franklin's face broke into a smile that transformed his features, making him look younger and less careworn. "I am sure. Come on, let us get you back to that settee. You need rest more than anything." He helped her settle back onto the leather cushions, covering her with a quilt that smelled of cedar and sunshine. Rebecca felt her eyes growing heavy, the warmth and safety of the house lulling her toward sleep. Just before she drifted off, she felt Franklin's hand touch her forehead briefly, brushing back a strand of hair. "Sleep well, Rebecca Bailey," he murmured. "You are home now." Those words followed her down into dreams that were, for the first time in days, free of gunfire and fear. When Rebecca woke, the light slanting through the windows suggested late afternoon. She could hear Franklin moving around outside, the sound of an axe biting into wood. Her body still ached, but the desperate exhaustion had lifted somewhat. She sat up carefully, testing her strength. The house looked different in the warmer light. She could see now that Franklin kept it neat but spare, with little decoration beyond what was functional. The furniture was good quality but worn from use. Everything spoke of a man who lived simply and honestly, without pretense or excess. Rebecca stood, steadying herself on the arm of the settee. Her legs felt more solid now, though her feet protested at bearing weight. She shuffled toward the kitchen, wanting to see what was there, already thinking about what she might cook for dinner. It was the least she could do to repay Franklin's kindness. The kitchen was organized in a way that suggested Franklin did his own cooking and kept things practical. A wood stove dominated one corner, well maintained and clean. Shelves held basic supplies: flour, salt, sugar, coffee, dried beans, cornmeal. A cold box contained eggs, butter, and what looked like fresh milk. Bunches of dried herbs hung from hooks, and a slab of bacon sat wrapped in cloth. A man's kitchen, but a competent one. Rebecca was standing in front of the stove, trying to figure out its quirks, when Franklin came through the back door with an armload of wood. He stopped when he saw her, surprise crossing his face. "You should be resting." "I have rested. Now I want to do something useful." Rebecca gestured at the stove. "I was thinking I could make dinner. You have been taking care of me all day. Let me take care of you." Franklin set down the wood and studied her. "You sure you are up to it?" "I worked in a factory for 2 years. Before that, I kept house for my father." "I can manage a stove." She paused. "Unless you do not want me in your kitchen." "It is not that. I just do not want you to overdo it." But Franklin was already pulling out pans and setting them on the stove. "Tell you what, how about we cook together? I will do the heavy lifting, you can direct operations. That way you stay off your feet but still get to feed us." It was a reasonable compromise. Rebecca found herself smiling. "Deal." They worked in companionable quiet, falling into an easy rhythm. Rebecca instructed while Franklin followed her directions, cutting vegetables and setting water to boil. She made biscuits while seated at the table, her hands remembering the motions her mother had taught her years ago. Franklin prepared the bacon and beans, checking with her frequently to make sure he was doing it to her satisfaction. "You actually know your way around a kitchen," Rebecca observed. "Had to learn after Ma died. First few years were rough, burned more meals than I can count. But eventually I figured it out." Franklin flipped the bacon with practiced ease. "Not fancy cooking, but it keeps a man alive. This is fancy compared to what I had in Philadelphia. Most nights I was too tired from the factory to do more than eat bread and cheese in my boarding house room." Franklin glanced at her. "That sounds like a hard life." "It was, but it was all I had." Rebecca shaped another biscuit and set it on the pan. "My father was a school teacher. When he died, there was no money left. Teaching does not pay much, and his medical bills took everything. I had no family to take me in, no skills except what my mother had taught me about running a household. The factory was the only place that would hire me. And this man Fitzgerald, he was your way out." "Yes, a chance at something better, or at least, a chance at something different." Rebecca met his eyes. "Does that make me mercenary?" "Makes you practical and brave to come all this way to marry a stranger." Franklin pulled the bacon off the heat. "Question is that still what you want?" Rebecca considered. In the abstract, Howard Fitzgerald still represented security and stability. But after just one day with Franklin, the thought of leaving to marry a man she had never met felt wrong in a way she could not articulate. "I do not know what I want anymore," she admitted. "Everything I thought I knew got scrambled up when those outlaws attacked the coach." "Then take your time figuring it out. No decisions need to be made today." Franklin began plating food. "For now, let us eat. I am hungry enough to eat a whole steer." The meal was simple but delicious, made better by being shared. They ate at the kitchen table as the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Franklin told her about the ranch, how his father had homesteaded the land 30 years ago when Arizona was even wilder than it was now. How they had built the house together, adding rooms as the family grew. He talked about his mother's garden, his father's skill with horses, the careful work of building a life in harsh country. Rebecca talked about Philadelphia, describing the narrow streets and tall buildings that must have seemed like a foreign land to someone who had spent his whole life under open skies. She told him about the factory, the endless noise of the machines, the lint that filled the air and made everyone cough. She described her father's small house with its shelves of books, the quiet evenings reading by lamplight. They were getting to know each other, Rebecca realized. Not with the careful, edited letters she had exchanged with Howard Fitzgerald, but with honest conversation that revealed who they really were. It felt natural, comfortable, like slipping into warm water after a long day. After dinner, Franklin insisted on cleaning up while Rebecca rested. She protested, but he was firm, pointing out that she had been injured and needed to conserve her strength. Instead, she sat at the table and watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved, the care he took even with simple tasks. "You are a good man, Franklin Dalton," she said quietly. He paused in his washing, looking over his shoulder at her. "Just doing what is right. Most men would not have helped me the way you have. They would have taken me to town, dropped me off, and considered their duty done. Then most men are fools." Franklin dried his hands and turned to face her fully. "Rebecca, I want you to understand something. You are welcome here for as long as you want to stay. No obligations, no expectations. Just a safe place to heal and figure out what comes next." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. "Thank you. That means more than you know." As darkness fell, Franklin lit lamps around the house, creating pools of warm light. He showed Rebecca to a small bedroom off the main room, clearly his mother's old room based on the delicate quilt and the lady's items still on the dresser. "I am taking your mother's room," Rebecca protested. "I have not used this room in 5 years. It is just sitting empty. Better it gets used by someone who needs it." Franklin set the lamp on the bedside table. "My room is on the other side of the house. You need anything, just call out." "I am a light sleeper." Rebecca looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. "Why are you doing all this, really? There has to be more to it than just being kind to a stranger." Franklin was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "You want the honest truth. When I found you in that chicken coop this morning, you looked so small and scared but also determined. Like you had been through hell but refused to give up. That took guts. And when you looked at me, there was no calculation in your eyes, no agenda. Just hope that maybe I might help." He ran a hand through his hair. "I have been alone on this ranch for years, and it has been fine. But having you here today, cooking together, talking, it reminded me what I have been missing. Company, connection, someone to share the day with. You barely know me, true. But I would like to know you better, if you are willing to stay long enough to let that happen." Rebecca felt her heart beat faster. "I think I would like that too." Franklin smiled, and again she was struck by how it changed his face. "Good. Then that is settled. Now get some rest. Tomorrow I will show you around the ranch proper if you are up to it." After he left, closing the door quietly behind him, Rebecca changed into a nightgown she found in the dresser, another artifact of Franklin's mother. The bed was soft, the linens clean and smelling of soap and sunshine. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the black sky, more stars than she had ever seen in Philadelphia, where the city lights drowned them out. She fell asleep thinking about blue-gray eyes and gentle hands, about a man who found her in a chicken coop and offered her sanctuary without asking anything in return. The next morning, Rebecca woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sunlight streamed through the window and she could hear chickens clucking outside. For a moment she was disoriented, then memory returned. The attack, the desert, Franklin. She was safe. She dressed in another of his mother's dresses, this one a simple brown cotton that was practical for work. Her body still ached but felt stronger than yesterday. The worst of the exhaustion had passed, leaving her stiff and sore but functional. Franklin was in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. He looked up when she entered, his face brightening. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in days." "Months, maybe." Rebecca accepted the coffee he poured for her. "Thank you for the room. The bed is very comfortable." "Good. You needed a proper rest." Franklin slid eggs and bacon onto plates. "Thought we could take a walk around the place this morning if you feel up to it." "Nothing too strenuous, just so you can get your bearings." After breakfast, Franklin led her outside into the morning sunshine. The ranch house sat in a small valley bisected by a creek lined with cottonwood and willow trees. Beyond the house stood a barn, a chicken coop, a small corral with several horses and various outbuildings. The land stretched away in gentle rises, covered in hardy grass and dotted with mesquite and sagebrush. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing. "It is beautiful," Rebecca breathed. "So much space. 320 acres, not as big as some spreads, but enough for a decent operation." Franklin pointed. "I run about 50 head of cattle plus the horses and chickens. Got a good well, and the creek never runs dry, even in the worst summers. The land is not easy, but it is honest." They walked slowly, Franklin accommodating her pace. He showed her the barn with its neat stalls and racks of tools. The horses came to the fence when they approached, curious about the stranger. Franklin introduced them by name. Thunder, his big bay gelding; Sage, a gentle mare with a white blaze; Copper, a young sorrel still in training. "They are magnificent," Rebecca said, reaching out tentatively to stroke Sage's velvet nose. The mare waffled softly, her dark eyes gentle. "Sage is sweet-tempered. She would be a good mount for you if you want to learn to ride, or if you already know." Franklin looked at her questioningly. "I never learned. No opportunity in Philadelphia. Then we will teach you. A woman should know how to ride out here. Might save your life someday." The reminder of how she had arrived hung in the air between them. They continued walking, Franklin pointing out various features of the property. The vegetable garden his mother had started, now gone mostly to weeds but with a few hardy plants still surviving. The spring house built over a cold spring where milk and butter stayed cool. The smokehouse where meat was preserved. Each building represented careful planning and hard work. "You built all this?" Rebecca asked. "My father did most of it, but I have added some and maintained everything. It is constant work, keeping a ranch going. Fences need mending, buildings need repair, animals need tending. Never a shortage of things to do." Franklin leaned against a fence post, looking out over his land. "But I love it. This place is part of me." Rebecca could hear the pride and affection in his voice. This ranch was not just property to Franklin. It was legacy, identity, home in the deepest sense. She found herself envying that connection, that sense of belonging somewhere. "I have never had anything like this," she admitted. "Even the house I grew up in was rented. We moved several times when I was young. After Mother died, it was just cramped rooms in a boarding house." "I have never had roots." Franklin turned to look at her. "Maybe it is time you did." The words hung between them, full of unspoken possibility. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? Before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted the moment. 2 riders were approaching from the direction of the road, moving at a steady trot. Franklin's expression grew guarded. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "Let me see who this is." As the riders drew closer, Rebecca could see they wore badges. The sheriff and a deputy, she guessed. They rode into the yard and dismounted, the older man tipping his hat toward Franklin. "Morning, Dalton. Heard you might have some information about that stagecoach attack." Franklin's face remained neutral. "Morning, Sheriff Carson. What makes you think that?" The sheriff, a weathered man with a gray mustache, gestured toward Rebecca. "Because Billy Peterson saw a woman matching the description of one of the missing passengers walking near your property 2 days ago. And unless I miss my guess, that is her standing right behind you." Rebecca stepped forward, her chin up despite her nervousness. "I am Rebecca Bailey. I was on that stagecoach." Sheriff Carson's expression softened. "Well, I will be. We figured you were dead, miss, or taken by those outlaws." "How did you get here?" Rebecca told her story again, the attack, her escape, her 3-day journey through the desert. The sheriff and his deputy listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she finished, Sheriff Carson shook his head in amazement. "You are one tough lady, Miss Bailey. Most folks would not have survived what you went through." He pulled out a small notebook. "Can you describe the attackers?" They wore bandanas over their faces, but there were 5 of them. The leader had a scar on his forehead above his left eye. It was visible even with the bandana. Rebecca closed her eyes, remembering. He rode a black horse with white stockings, and he wore silver conchos on his belt. "Jack Morrison," the deputy said quietly. "Has to be." Sheriff Carson nodded grimly. "Sounds like him. He has been hitting stagecoaches all over this part of Arizona for the past year. We have been trying to catch him, but he is slippery." He looked at Rebecca with new respect. "You have got a good eye for detail, miss." I was terrified, but I made myself look at them, remember them. "In case I survived. Smart." The sheriff turned to Franklin. "She's staying with you, Dalton, for now, until she is healed and decides what she wants to do." The sheriff's expression was knowing. "That's so. Well, I will need to take an official statement from Miss Bailey." "Can you bring her into Gila Bend in the next few days?" "I can do that." After more discussion about the attack and the Morrison gang, the sheriff and deputy prepared to leave. But Sheriff Carson paused before mounting his horse, looking between Franklin and Rebecca with speculation in his eyes. "You know, there is a man in Gila Bend who is going to be mighty relieved to hear Miss Bailey is alive. Fellow named Howard Fitzgerald. He has been frantic, posted a reward for any information about her whereabouts." Rebecca felt Franklin tense beside her. Her own stomach knotted. Of course. Howard Fitzgerald thought she was dead or missing. He would want to know she was safe. "I will need to see him," she said quietly. "He paid for my passage. He deserves to know I am alive." "I expect he will want to do more than know you are alive, miss. He was planning on marrying you." The sheriff mounted his horse. "Just something to think about." After the lawman rode away, an awkward silence fell between Rebecca and Franklin. They walked back to the house slowly, neither speaking. Rebecca felt the weight of obligation settling back on her shoulders. She owed Howard Fitzgerald. He had paid her way west, offered her marriage and security. The fact that she had been attacked was not his fault. The honorable thing would be to go to Gila Bend, meet him, and fulfill her agreement. But the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Franklin, filled her with unexpected grief. "I have to go see him," she said finally. "It is the right thing to do, I know." Franklin's voice was flat, carefully neutral. "I will take you to town tomorrow if you are feeling up to the ride." "Franklin, it is fine, Rebecca. You had an arrangement before you ever met me." "I understand that." He climbed the steps to the house without looking at her. "I will get the wagon ready." Rebecca stood in the yard, watching him disappear inside. In just 2 days, this place had started to feel like home. Franklin had started to feel like home. But honor and obligation were powerful forces, and she had been raised to respect both. That night at dinner, the easy companionship of the previous evening was absent. Franklin was polite but distant, and Rebecca found herself making conversation that fell flat. They cleaned up in near silence, moving around each other like strangers. Before bed, Rebecca stopped Franklin in the main room. "I need you to understand something. I am going to meet Mr. Fitzgerald because I owe him that courtesy, but I have not made any decisions about what happens after." Franklin's expression was carefully blank. "You should marry him, Rebecca. He can give you security, a place in town, a comfortable life. That is what you came here for. Maybe, or maybe what I came here for found me in a different way." She took a step closer. "These 2 days with you, I have felt more at home than I have in years, since before my mother died, and I do not want to give that up without at least considering if there might be another option." Something flickered in Franklin's eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. "What are you saying?" "I am saying do not write me off yet. Let me meet Mr. Fitzgerald, settle my obligation, then we can talk about what comes next." Rebecca reached out and touched his arm. "If you want there to be a next." Franklin covered her hand with his grip warm and solid. "I want there to be a next. More than I have wanted anything in a long time." They stood like that for a long moment, connected by that simple touch, neither willing to break the contact. Finally, Franklin stepped back, his hand falling away. "Get some rest. It will be a long ride tomorrow." Rebecca lay awake for hours that night, thinking about the choice ahead of her. On one side, Howard Fitzgerald represented the practical choice. Security, respectability, the life she had planned. On the other side, Franklin Dalton represented something else. Connection, belonging, the possibility of real happiness. But choosing him meant abandoning her obligations, going back on her word. It meant taking a risk on feelings that had barely had time to develop. Morning came too soon. Rebecca dressed carefully in the best of the dresses from Franklin's mother's trunk, a deep green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair up neatly and tried to look like a woman meeting her prospective husband rather than a refugee from a disaster. Franklin had the wagon ready, hitched to a sturdy draft horse. He helped her up onto the seat with careful courtesy, then climbed up beside her. The ride to Gila Bend took nearly 2 hours over rough roads. They spoke little, both lost in their own thoughts. Gila Bend was a typical Arizona town, a wide main street lined with false front buildings, a scattering of houses spreading out from the center. The wagon rattled past a general store, a saloon, a bank, a hotel. People on the boardwalk turned to look at them as they passed. "Fitzgerald runs the Mercantile," Franklin said, his voice tight. "That building there with the green awning." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of a well-maintained store with large display windows showing an array of goods. Through the glass, Rebecca could see a man behind the counter, middle-aged and portly, talking to a customer. Her heart sank. This was Howard Fitzgerald, the man she was supposed to marry. "I should go in alone," she said. "I will be right here." Franklin's hands gripped the reins tightly. "Take your time." Rebecca climbed down from the wagon and stood for a moment, gathering her courage. Then she pushed open the door, setting off a bell that announced her arrival. Howard Fitzgerald looked up from his customer. He was perhaps 45, with thinning hair and the beginnings of a substantial belly straining against his vest. His face was pleasant but unremarkable, his expression businesslike. When he saw Rebecca, confusion crossed his features. "May I help you, Mr. Fitzgerald? I am Rebecca Bailey." The man's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then joy. "Rebecca, but the stagecoach, they said you were dead. I have been." He stopped, seeming to notice the other customer for the first time. "Mrs. Henderson, please excuse me, family emergency." The woman left with a curious glance at Rebecca. As soon as the door closed behind her, Howard came around the counter. For a moment Rebecca thought he might embrace her, but he stopped short, his hands fluttering uncertainly. "You are alive. Thank God. What happened? Where have you been?" Rebecca told a simplified version of her story, omitting most of her time at Franklin's ranch and focusing on her escape and survival. Howard listened with growing agitation, occasionally interjecting exclamations of horror. "Those animals! Those murderous animals!" He shook his head. "And you, poor thing, walking alone through that desert, you could have died." "But I did not. A rancher found me and helped me recover." "A rancher?" Howard's expression grew shrewd. "The man with the wagon outside." "Yes, Franklin Dalton. He has been very kind." "I am sure he has." Something in Howard's tone made Rebecca bristle. "Well, you are safe now. That is what matters, and we can proceed with our original plans." "Plans?" "Our marriage, my dear. That is why you came here, after all." Howard smiled, revealing slightly yellowed teeth. "We will need to wait a few weeks, give you time to recover and get properly outfitted. I will cover the expenses, of course, and we should probably have a proper courtship period, let the town see us together." Rebecca felt a rising panic. Howard was talking as if everything was settled, as if the attack had been merely an inconvenience rather than something that had changed her entire perspective. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I think we should talk about this." "Call me Howard, please. We are to be married, after all." "That is what I want to discuss. I am very grateful for everything you have done, paying my passage and being concerned about my welfare. But perhaps we should take some time before making permanent decisions." Howard's smile faded. "Take time. Rebecca, we had an agreement. I have held up my end. I expect you to hold up yours." The mercenary tone shocked her. "I am not a business transaction." "Of course not. But you did agree to marry me in exchange for passage west and a secure future. I have already invested considerable money in you. Surely you do not mean to go back on your word." Rebecca felt as if she were seeing Howard clearly for the first time. In his letters he had seemed kind and thoughtful. In person he was calculating and proprietary. He saw her as an investment, not a person. "I need time to think," she said firmly. "I have been through a terrible experience. Surely you can understand that I might need to recover before making life-changing decisions." Howard's expression hardened. "How much time?" "I do not know. Weeks maybe. A month." "And where will you stay during this time? You have no money, no possessions." "Are you planning to impose on that rancher's hospitality? Mr. Dalton has offered me a safe place to recover." "I am sure he has." Howard's voice dripped with insinuation. "A young woman, alone with an unmarried man. You understand how that looks, I assume." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. Nothing improper has happened. Yet. But reputations are fragile things, my dear. A few weeks of living with a man and no decent person will want you. He stepped closer, his expression calculating. "Marry me now, today if you like, and all is forgiven. You will have security, respect, a place in society. Refuse, and you will have nothing. That rancher might seem appealing now, but men like that do not marry women with tarnished reputations. They use them and move on." The ugly words hit like physical blows. Rebecca took a step back, suddenly wanting to be anywhere but in this stuffy store with this small-minded man. "I would rather be alone than marry someone who thinks of me as property," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Thank you for your offer, Mr. Fitzgerald, but I decline. I will find a way to repay the money you spent on my passage." "With what? You have nothing." Howard's face flushed red. "You are making a terrible mistake. Do not come crawling back when that rancher throws you out." Rebecca turned and walked out of the store, her head high despite the tears threatening to spill. She climbed back into the wagon beside Franklin, who took one look at her face and snapped the reins, getting them moving without asking questions. They were outside of town before Rebecca trusted herself to speak. That was a disaster. That bad. Worse. Rebecca wiped at her eyes. He thinks he owns me because he paid for my passage, and he made it very clear what he thinks about me staying with you. Franklin's jaw clenched. What did he say? That my reputation would be ruined. That no decent man would want me after I had lived with you. That you would use me and throw me away. She let out a bitter laugh. He basically said I should marry him or face ruin. That pompous, self-righteous. Franklin cut himself off, taking a breath. You are better off without him, Rebecca. A man who would talk to you like that does not deserve you. But he is right about one thing. I have no money, no possessions. I cannot stay with you indefinitely without people talking, and I cannot repay his money. The hopelessness of her situation washed over her. I have nowhere to go. Franklin pulled the wagon to a stop at the side of the road. He turned to face her fully, his expression intense. Marry me. Rebecca stared at him. What, marry me? Not because you owe anyone anything, not because you have no other options, but because these past few days have been the happiest I have had in years. Because when I talk to you, I feel like you actually see me, not just what I can provide. Because I think we could build something real together. Franklin took her hand. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I also know that finding you in that chicken coop felt like finding something I did not even know I was missing. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. Franklin, you cannot mean that. We have known each other for 3 days. I have known you long enough to know you are brave and kind and stronger than you realize. Long enough to know I do not want to imagine my house without you in it. His grip on her hand tightened. I am not saying it would be easy. Ranch life is hard work, but it is honest work and we would be partners in it, true partners. What about love? Rebecca whispered. You barely know if you love me. I know that every time I look at you, I want to keep looking. I know that the thought of taking you to town and leaving you there made me feel like someone was pulling my heart out. I know that is not the same as years of building a life together, but it feels like a pretty good start. Franklin brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I am not going to lie and say I am in love with you after 3 days, but I am falling, fast and hard, and I think you might be falling too. Rebecca felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but they were not tears of despair anymore. I am falling, and it terrifies me. I came here to make a practical marriage to secure my future, and instead I found you, and you make me want things I did not even know I was allowed to want. Then say yes. Say yes and let us figure out the rest together. There were 100 practical reasons to refuse. They barely knew each other. She would be trading one hasty marriage for another. People would talk, would assume the worst. But when Rebecca looked at Franklin, at the hope and sincerity in his blue-gray eyes, all those practical reasons faded away. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Franklin's face broke into a smile that was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, and Rebecca wrapped her arms around his neck and held on, feeling like she had finally found solid ground after weeks of falling. When they pulled apart, both were laughing through tears. Franklin cupped her face in his hands. I am going to do everything I can to make you happy, Rebecca Bailey. That is a promise. Just love me, she said. That is all I need. Just love me and let me love you back. I can do that. Franklin kissed her forehead gently. Now let us go back to town and find the preacher, unless you want to wait. No waiting. I am tired of waiting for my life to start. Rebecca smiled through her tears. Let us get married today. The ride back to Gila Bend felt different this time, full of excitement and possibility rather than dread. They went straight to the small church at the end of the main street, where the minister listened to their story with raised eyebrows, but agreed to perform the ceremony. Rebecca suspected their urgency looked suspicious, but she did not care. All that mattered was the man standing beside her, holding her hand like he would never let go. They needed witnesses, so the minister sent his wife to fetch the sheriff and his wife. Sheriff Carson came with an amused expression but kindly eyes. "You work fast, Dalton," he observed. "When you find something good, you do not let it slip away," Franklin replied, squeezing Rebecca's hand. The ceremony was simple, just the basic words of the marriage rite. Franklin spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. When it was her turn, Rebecca found her voice surprisingly strong despite the enormity of what she was doing. "I, Rebecca Bailey, take you, Franklin Dalton, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." The minister pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said with a smile. Franklin leaned down and kissed Rebecca gently, his lips warm and soft against hers. It was their first kiss, and it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something that could last forever. After signing the marriage certificate, they walked out of the church as husband and wife. The afternoon sun painted everything in golden light. Rebecca felt like she was moving through a dream. "We should get supplies," Franklin said practically. "If you are going to be living at the ranch full-time, we will need a few things." They walked to the general store, deliberately avoiding the mercantile where Howard Fitzgerald worked. Rebecca could feel eyes on them as they moved through town, could hear the whispers. The story of her survival and sudden marriage would be all over Gila Bend by nightfall. But she found she did not care. Let them talk. She had found something real, something worth more than reputation. At the general store, they bought fabric for new dresses, boots that actually fit Rebecca's feet, a new hat, and various supplies for the ranch. Franklin insisted on buying her a lovely shawl in soft blue wool despite her protests about the expense. "You are my wife now," he said firmly. "I provide for my wife." Those words, "my wife," sent a thrill through Rebecca every time she heard them. She was somebody's wife, part of a unit, no longer alone in the world. The feeling was headier than she had expected. They loaded their purchases into the wagon and headed back to the ranch. The sun was setting by the time they arrived, painting the sky in spectacular colors. Franklin helped Rebecca down from the wagon, and for a moment they stood together, looking at the house that was now their shared home. "Are you scared?" Franklin asked quietly. "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. "And happy, and grateful, and about a dozen other things I cannot even name. Me too." Franklin took her hand. "But we will figure it out together. That is what marriage is, I think, figuring it out together." They carried the supplies inside and spent the evening putting things away and making dinner together. There was an undercurrent of tension now, the awareness that they were married, that the night ahead would bring intimacy they had not yet shared. But it was a sweet tension, full of anticipation rather than fear. After dinner, as they cleaned up, Franklin broached the subject carefully. "Rebecca, I want you to know that there is no pressure tonight. We have taken enough big steps for one day. If you need time—" "I do not need time," Rebecca interrupted. She set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. "I am nervous, yes. But I am also your wife, and I want to be your wife in every way." She felt heat rise in her cheeks but held his gaze. "Unless you want to wait." "No," Franklin's voice was rough. "I do not want to wait." He took her hand and led her to his bedroom, the larger one on the opposite side of the house from where she had been sleeping. The room was simple but comfortable, with a large bed and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Franklin lit the lamp on the bedside table, and soft light filled the space. "I will be gentle," he promised, turning to face her. "If anything hurts or feels wrong, you tell me to stop. Your comfort is more important than anything else." Rebecca stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. "I trust you, Franklin." What followed was tender and sweet, both of them fumbling a bit with nervousness but finding their way together. Franklin was true to his word, careful and gentle, making sure Rebecca felt safe and cared for. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the sheets, both breathing hard, both smiling. "That was," Rebecca started, then stopped, not quite sure how to describe it. "Perfect," Franklin finished. "That was perfect." He pulled her close, and Rebecca rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. In 3 days, her entire life had changed. She had gone from alone and desperate to married and hopeful. It felt like a miracle. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For finding me, for helping me, for choosing me." Rebecca pressed a kiss to his chest. "For making me feel like I finally belong somewhere." Franklin's arms tightened around her. "You do belong, right here with me. That is where you belong now." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, the beginning of their life together settling around them like a blessing. The next weeks passed in a blur of settling in and getting to know each other properly. Rebecca learned the rhythms of ranch life. The early mornings, the constant work, the satisfaction of physical labor and visible results. Franklin taught her to milk the cow, to gather eggs without getting pecked, to work the garden and coax vegetables from the stubborn soil. He also taught her to ride, starting with patient lessons in the corral on gentle sage. Rebecca fell off more times than she could count at first, but Franklin was always there to help her up, to encourage her to try again. By the end of the first month, she could sit a horse reasonably well and ride around the ranch without falling off. In return, Rebecca brought her own skills to their partnership. She was an excellent cook, and Franklin began to fill out a bit as he enjoyed proper meals instead of bachelor fare. She organized the house, making it cleaner and more comfortable. She mended his clothes, patched the curtains, brought life back to his mother's garden. Slowly, the house transformed from a place where a man survived to a home where a family lived, and they talked. Long conversations in the evening after work was done, getting to know each other's histories, dreams, fears. Franklin told her about his childhood, his parents, his failed engagement. Rebecca shared her memories of Philadelphia, her father's death, her desperate hope for a better life. They discovered shared loves, books, horses, the beauty of sunrise over the mountains. They found they made each other laugh, that conversation came easily, that companionship deepened naturally into something stronger. The intimacy between them grew as well. The first tentative nights gave way to more confident explorations, learning each other's bodies and preferences. Rebecca discovered that Franklin was not just gentle but passionate, that he took genuine pleasure in her pleasure. She found her own confidence growing, her initial shyness giving way to honest desire. 2 months after their marriage, Franklin took Rebecca back to Gila Bend to show her off at the town social, a monthly gathering that brought the scattered ranchers and townspeople together. Rebecca wore a new dress she had sewn herself from the fabric Franklin had bought, a pretty calico in shades of blue that complemented her coloring. Franklin wore his best clothes, and they arrived in the wagon with Rebecca sitting close beside him. The social was held in the church hall, with long tables set up for food and space cleared for dancing. Rebecca felt nervous as they entered, knowing that people would be curious about her, that there would be judgment and speculation. But Franklin kept her hand firmly in his, presenting her with obvious pride. "Folks, I want you to meet my wife, Rebecca Dalton." The name still gave her a thrill. Not Rebecca Bailey anymore, but Rebecca Dalton, wife of Franklin, mistress of his ranch. She was somebody now, connected and belonging. Most people were kind, if curious. The ranch wives welcomed her into their circle, sharing advice about gardening at altitude and preserving food for the harsh winters. The men nodded to Franklin with approval, recognizing that he had found himself a good woman. Rebecca saw Howard Fitzgerald glowering from across the room but ignored him. That chapter of her life was closed. When the dancing started, Franklin led her onto the floor. He was not a graceful dancer, but he was enthusiastic, and Rebecca found herself laughing as they spun through a reel. Being held by him, moving with him, surrounded by music and the warmth of community, Rebecca felt happiness bubble up inside her like champagne. "Are you happy?" Franklin asked, his voice low in her ear as they danced. "Happier than I have ever been," she answered truthfully. "Good. That is all I want, to make you happy." After the dance, they walked outside to cool off. The night air was crisp, full of the scent of sage and juniper. They stood together under the stars, Franklin's arm around Rebecca's shoulders, looking out at the darkness beyond the town. "I have been thinking," Franklin said. "The ranch is doing well. I have been talking to some of the other ranchers about pooling resources, maybe organizing a proper cattle drive to the railroad next spring. If it works out, we would have some extra money." "That sounds good," Rebecca said. "I was thinking maybe we could use some of that money to add on to the house. Another bedroom, maybe two, for when children come." Rebecca felt warmth spread through her chest. They had not talked much about children yet, but she wanted them. Wanted to fill Franklin's house with laughter and life, to build the family neither of them had any more. "I would like that," she said softly. "Though we might need that extra room sooner than you think." Franklin went very still. "Rebecca, are you saying, I think I might be pregnant?" "It is early yet, too early to be sure, but my courses are late and I have been feeling strange in the mornings." She looked up at him, trying to read his expression in the starlight. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy," Franklin's voice broke. He pulled her around to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Rebecca, I am over the moon, a baby, our baby." He kissed her hard and passionate, then pulled back to look at her with concern. "Are you happy? Is this what you want?" "Yes," Rebecca said, tears of joy filling her eyes. "Yes, I want this. I want everything with you, Franklin. A home, a family, a life. All of it." They held each other under the stars, both of them crying now, overwhelmed by the unexpected blessings that had come from such dark beginnings. Rebecca thought about the frightened woman hiding in a chicken coop just a few months ago, and marveled at how far she had come. The pregnancy was confirmed a few weeks later. Rebecca bloomed with it, her body growing round as winter settled over the ranch. Franklin fussed over her constantly, trying to keep her from doing heavy work, but Rebecca insisted on maintaining her share of the labor. She felt strong and vital, more alive than she had ever felt. They spent the winter months preparing for the baby, with Franklin building a cradle from wood he had been saving for something special. Rebecca sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full as she imagined the child who would wear them. They argued good-naturedly about names, finally settling on Thomas for a boy and Elizabeth for a girl. The baby came in early April, after a labor that lasted most of a day and left Rebecca exhausted but elated. Franklin had ridden hard to fetch the midwife from the neighboring ranch, then stayed beside Rebecca through the whole ordeal, letting her squeeze his hand until it bruised, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, telling her she was doing wonderfully even when she was cursing his name. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, the midwife announced, "It is a boy." Franklin held his son with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. "Thomas Franklin Dalton," he said reverently. "Welcome to the world, little man." Rebecca watched through exhausted tears as Franklin cradled their baby, his face transformed by wonder and love. This rough cowboy who had found her in a chicken coop was now a father, and he looked at their son like he held the entire universe in his arms. When he finally laid the baby in Rebecca's arms, she felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it took her breath away. This tiny person, created from her union with Franklin, represented everything she had never dared to hope for: family, home, belonging. "Look what we made," she whispered, tracing her finger over Thomas's tiny face. "Look what we created together." "He is perfect," Franklin said, sitting beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders so they both held their son. "You are perfect. This whole life is perfect." The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. The ranch continued to thrive, and Franklin's cattle drive proved successful, bringing in enough money to add 2 new bedrooms to the house as planned. Rebecca regained her strength and found she could manage ranch work with a baby strapped to her back or playing in a pen Franklin built near wherever she was working. They made friends among the neighboring ranchers and became part of the community. Rebecca joined the church women's group and started teaching some of the ranch children reading and arithmetic, putting her father's legacy to good use. Franklin became known as a fair dealer and a good neighbor, always willing to help when trouble struck. When Thomas was 18 months old, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her body's ability to bring a child into the world. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when she went into labor on a crisp October evening, she knew what to expect. This baby came faster, arriving after just a few hours of labor. Another boy, this one with Rebecca's auburn hair and Franklin's blue-gray eyes. They named him Samuel, and Thomas was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to touch him and help in ways that required constant supervision. With 2 children, the house that had been too empty was now full of noise and life. Rebecca's days were long and exhausting, but she had never been happier. Every morning she woke up beside Franklin, every night she fell asleep in his arms. Between those moments, her life was filled with the sweet chaos of family. Babies crying and then laughing, Thomas learning to talk and ask endless questions, meals prepared and shared, work done side by side. 3 years after their wedding, Rebecca stood in the yard watching Thomas, now a sturdy 4-year-old, help Franklin mend a fence while baby Samuel napped in his cradle on the porch. The vegetable garden was thriving, the chickens were fat and productive, and the ranch was prosperous. She rested her hand on her belly, feeling the flutter of the 3rd baby growing there. Franklin looked up from his work and caught her watching. His face broke into that smile she loved, the one that made him look younger and softer. He left Thomas hammering ineffectually at a fence post and walked over to her, pulling her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing her forehead. "About chicken coops," Rebecca said with a laugh. "About how finding shelter with your chickens was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me," Franklin chuckled. "I think those chickens would be pretty smug if they knew they were responsible for all this." He gestured at the house, the children, the life they had built. "Should we give them extra feed?" "I think we should." Rebecca stood on her toes to kiss him properly. "Thank you, Franklin, for everything, for finding me, for saving me, for loving me, for making me the mistress of this wonderful home." "You were always meant to be here," Franklin said seriously. "I just did not know it until I opened that chicken coop door and found you there. The woman I had been waiting for my whole life, hiding in the straw." They stood together in the afternoon sunshine, his arms around her, their children playing nearby, their home solid and welcoming behind them. Rebecca thought about the terrified woman who had stumbled into that chicken coop 5 years ago, desperate and alone. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different life. This was her life now. This ranch, this man, these children, this community. She had come west looking for security and found so much more. She had found love, genuine and deep. She had found purpose. She had found home. "I love you," she said to Franklin, the words she spoke every day but never tired of saying. "I love you too," he answered, the same words he spoke back, always meaning them with his whole heart. Thomas called for his father, needing help with the hammer. Samuel began to fuss from the porch, ready to be picked up and held. Rebecca felt the baby move inside her, strong and healthy. The afternoon stretched ahead, full of work and laughter and the thousand small moments that made up a life. She had been a woman sheltering with chickens, desperate and afraid. Now she was Rebecca Dalton, wife of Franklin, mother of Thomas and Samuel and the baby yet to come, mistress of a thriving ranch in the Arizona Territory. She had survived outlaws and desert, loneliness and loss, only to find everything she needed in a man who had offered her sanctuary without question. And every day for the rest of her life, she would be grateful that Franklin Dalton had opened that chicken coop door and found her there, waiting for him without knowing it, ready to begin the greatest adventure of all. A life built on love, partnership, and the courage to take chances on hope. Years later, when people asked her about her journey west, about how she had met Franklin, Rebecca would tell the story simply. She had been sheltering with his chickens, and he had found her and made her the mistress of his home. But she and Franklin both knew the truth was more complex and more beautiful than that simple sentence could convey. It was a story about survival and courage, about taking risks on love even when it seemed illogical. It was about finding home in unexpected places and building a life from moments of kindness and acts of faith. It was about two lonely people who found each other when they needed it most and chose to build something lasting together. And it was a story that continued every day, written in the laughter of children, the touch of hands reaching for each other in the darkness, the quiet satisfaction of work done together, and the deep knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged, with exactly who they belonged with, for all the days of their lives.